What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron, and regular on the show, Jac Manuell. Guys, how are we doing on this Wednesday evening?
Podcasting with the homies.
We're the three best friends that anybody could have, even though Jack may dispute that behind my back.
I mean, everyone hated Alan like a little bit. I think that's like both of us with you, Kory. I mean, Nick says he likes you, and he's technically been friends with you longer, but we both do a podcast together, so let's put it that way.
Oh, God. I'm not getting in between this. You guys can have your battles alone, but we are a trio, and this is a fun trio. Plenty to talk about today. We started a trade deadline marathon at otgbasketball.com, so we are dropping a trade proposal every single day leading up to the trade deadline, and we also partnered up with TradeNBA.com. But as always, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, otgbasketball.com, and YouTube. Before we get into the trades, we're going to talk about Zion Williamson, who's supposed to make his return next week, January 22nd. What did you guys think when you heard this news?
Oh, I'm ridiculously excited, Nick. Any news about Zion? I watched. Well, there was a podcast with him with JJ Redick, but it was also put on YouTube and him talking about it. I'm in the Zion hype. You know, getting the tees, buying the tees from dsgentry.com/off-the-glass Zionology. I'm all about it. Can't wait to see him out there. If he could bring that preseason form into the regular season, and boy, oh boy, the Spurs should be worried, and the Pelicans could be a sneaky playoff chance. And it is. I mean, there hasn't been as much hype for this guy than probably we can imagine with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, those sort of blokes. But also, I think that it's also it might even go under the radar a little bit because Jac Manuell has been so insane of late. So I think it's a nice time for Zion to get back. And, you know, we've seen that the recovery hasn't just been about the knee injury. It's been about movement mechanics and making sure that he has a long and healthy career with the Pelicans organization. So I like that they're taking their time. I'm a Nets fan, so we know we preach that as well. I'm just really salivating to see him on the court and dunking and passing and playing defense. He's a monster.
Yeah. So Zion Williamson, obviously, so much hype going into the year. We've unfortunately haven't been able to see him ball out yet. We've seen Jac Manuell, as you mentioned, Jack. Every night the guy's giving us 5 to 10 highlight plays. It feels like. And something to note, the Pelicans may have a losing record. They may be 14th in the Western Conference, but of their 15 wins and 28 losses, 23 games of theirs this season have been decided by 10 or less points. This is a team that is in a lot of their basketball games. They play a very entertaining brand of basketball, as we mentioned, like Brandon Ingram balls out. Lonzo Ball's had a recent boost in his production. Drew Holiday, when he's out there, is a monster. We know what JJ Redick provides. Jackson Hayes has given us some nice highlights. And now you're adding in another young player to the mix. So once again, the Pelicans, who I've watched probably the second most of any team so far this year, is going to remain a team I watch even more so when Zion Williamson comes back, because the Pelicans, fact of the matter, they're just a very fun team, and you're going to be adding a guy in who we are all dying to watch. It's the reason why the Pelicans have so many national televised games was because of Zion, and we are a week away from having that.
Yeah, there's no guarantee he's going to improve their level of basketball on the court, depending on fit or whatever it may be. But at the very least, like Kory mentioned, it's going to be a fun factor. This is a guy that's going to provide you with highlights. He provided highlights in the preseason. And I think it's important for the Pelicans to get him on the court this season to see how he fits with a couple of the other players, specifically Brandon Ingram, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But making sure those two fit well together is important because Brandon Ingram's contract is going to be up at the end of the year.
Yeah.
It's been a point of contention on JBT quite regularly of late. Me and Nick Busick, he thinks that the Pelicans should be resting Zion and doesn't see necessarily the benefit of bringing him back. What are your thoughts, so I can bring it back to him, what actual NBA experts and people who watch the game, and so I can just throw some more evidence his way that he is an absolute dundering idiot.
I liked your little banter this week about KD. That was pretty fun. So hopefully we get a repeat about Zion. I think it's important. I always want to see young players play on the court. It doesn't really matter because even if Zion plays next season, the Pelicans aren't a contender. They're still far from that. So I think you want to get him reps and see what he needs to work on in the offseason. Going against NBA competition is huge, especially in the regular season compared to the preseason and what he did in college. Those reps are important, in my opinion.
So this is one of those rare moments where me and Nick don't necessarily agree.
Oh, no.
Which this is rare. Honestly, it's rare. Me and Nick agree way too much for podcast co-host. But I, personally, I don't see. I mean, yes, Nick is right in the sense where if you want to see what guys fit with Zion, the earlier you can do that, the sooner the better, right? If he can't mix with Lonzo or whoever it may be, then maybe you can make changes this offseason instead of having to wait for the future offseason. My only thought is, if Zion was so quick to get hurt, they had to work on him to make sure, he was walking a different way now, correcting. Again, they're not. And the headline was misleading to a degree. They weren't reteaching him how to walk, which is what some people took from that. They were simply just giving him kind of what I took from different ways to handle his weight with the way he walks. So just tweaking things, not necessarily teaching him how to walk from scratch. But I don't think there's a need to rush him. I would not want Zion to touch the court unless I am 110% confident in him being fully healthy and there not being any, him getting hurt in a season doesn't mean anything. So I can see what Nick is saying, and I agree with Nick to a degree that it does help in the long-term picture to figure out what guys you may want around Zion, which guys you don't want around Zion. My only concern is I just don't want to put Zion in jeopardy for something that doesn't necessarily matter, which would be this season.
Jack, I'm going to jump back in. I think he is 100% healthy because Jack and I were kind of talking about this off air. He only had a meniscus injury. We're not talking about a torn ACL, a broken ankle. This is an injury we've seen players have and return in the season and play at a high level again. Some guys have returned in even a month, and he's been out essentially, 5 months at this point? And like you mentioned, they're kind of working on him. And even if they play him, I don't think they're forced to play him every night, or if for some reason something went wrong, hey, we're going to rest him 5 games and then bring him back out there. I think you just want to get him on the court. And I really think it's important to find out if Zion and Brandon Ingram fit, because Brandon Ingram's going to get a max contract this year. And if he's not a great fit next to potentially your best player, now all of a sudden you're setting the roster up for kind of destruction.
Right.
I mean, we need to get a round table or a square table, Kory and Nick Busick on one side, and the right people, the eloquent people, Nick Fay and Jac Manuell on the other. I mean, we always have fun. We've podcasted as a quad in the past, so that would certainly bring a massive fire.
I agree. Yo, tell Nick to come to the wedding. We'll set up a table.
Yeah. So stop the wedding shenanigans. We got a podcast to record.
Sorry, Sin. Actually, quick shout out to my fiance. Happy birthday to Cynthia. But moving on from there, talking about the trade deadline. And first up actually is the Pelicans and the Bulls. And this is via our Chandler Harper. He has the Bulls sending Coby White and Lauri Markkanen to the Pelicans in exchange for Brandon Ingram and Kendrick Williams. And the basis of this trade is he believes that Brandon Ingram will not be a great fit next to Zion. And he doesn't want to see the Pelicans get locked up with that contract.
Spicy. I like it. I don't mind it. I think that there is inherent value to this trade. And I like the creativity of it from Chandler as well, because I believe in the spacing of Lauri Markkanen, and I think Coby White is a decent young prospect. Kendrick Williams is decent enough as well as a nice rotation piece to chuck in there. I think Brandon Ingram is eons above what Lauri Markkanen is right now, as is reflected in Kory and I's top 50, one of the best young wings in the league. I think that, his three-point shot is going to get better, and he's still very good. I think he will fit perfectly. I think he can actually, not perfectly, I think he'll fit well next to Zion. I think both of them are good defenders. I like the interchangeability. I think Lauri Markkanen is I think he's a poor defender, whereas I think Ingram has defensive acumen on him. So if we're talking holistically about the players, I understand the fit. I like the creativity, but I'm keeping Brandon Ingram, who for me could be one of the best wings in the NBA. We've talked in past outlets, who's going to be the best player in the next 7 to 10 years. Who you got out of these guys? For me, Brandon Ingram has the potential to be a superstar wing in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely an interesting trade and nice way to start off the trade deadline marathon at OTG. I think it makes more sense for the Bulls than it does that of the Pelicans. As you mentioned, Jack, Lauri Markkanen is a piss poor defender at this point in time. And we mentioned that I think it was actually the last Believe It or Not we did with us three. Lauri Markkanen's 3-point percentage did start off terrible to start the year. It has risen over the last few months. But again, there hasn't been sign of that being a consistent part of his game. So if you're the Bulls and you can move and get a guy like Brandon Ingram to pair up with Zach LaVine, at least you have two guys who can arguably give you 25 points per game a night. And then I also think in that scenario, you probably try and move Otto Porter Jr. if you're the Bulls in this scenario, to just free up the wing position. And then, Pelicans side, you're getting rid of Ingram. Maybe you don't want to pay Ingram. Then you get Lauri Markkanen, who still has some upside to him. And then Coby White, who I'm actually a big fan of from this rookie class. The guy has been instant offense off the bench. If you get a guy like Coby White, maybe you're not so sold on Lonzo Ball long term because of his scoring woes at times. But Coby White could probably fill that role. So I think it makes more sense for the Bulls. But again, like, I could see in some world a similar deal like this happening. I think the Bulls would have to send a draft pick though to the Pelicans as well. I don't think Markkanen and White are enough. Maybe that's not true though.
I like the idea of the trade. I like the idea of moving Brandon Ingram when his value is really high, especially if you don't want to pay him. I don't necessarily love the package from the Bulls because I'm not sure. Lauri Markkanen is so inconsistent. Obviously, with Boylen being the coach, that's kind of hindered him as well. It's like, is he really going to be, ever an all-star? Is he going to be a high-end starter? What's he going to be? And then Coby White, he's definitely shown some flashes, but just based off of what I've seen this year, he just screams six-man type of player, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but when you're trading Brandon Ingram, who could potentially turn into, maybe one of the best scorers in the NBA in a few years, I think you want to get a better deal. I don't know if this package is what I would look for, but I'm open to the idea of trading Brandon Ingram and trying to get some other young pieces.
Yeah.
Moving on to day 2, and our guys kept it spicy for the first 3 days, and like I mentioned, we'll be dropping a trade every day up to February 7th. But Dalton Pence, who I'm sure is going to drop a lot of trade articles, is sending Kevin Love to Phoenix, and the Cavs are getting Tyler Johnson, Frank Kaminsky, Dario Saric, and a first-round pick in 2022.
I like this. I think this is incredibly realistic from Dalton as well. I think Kevin Love's value to certain teams outweighs to what it does to others. I think Portland, I've advocated that probably stronger than many other guys on the outlet on JBT early in the season, around October and such. But as of late, I think that the Phoenix Suns may have overtaken in terms of what they want and what they need in terms of trying to be a fringe playoff contender. And they need something right now. They started the season hot and they just need to add some more talent there. And getting rid of those expirings, I think you're not really losing a lot. And, giving up a first rounder, I think that the Cavs might say they want a little bit more, but there aren't going to be many teams that are going to give them a first round pick for Kevin Love, who I've heard on plenty of, national NBA podcasts that see him as a negative asset, obviously, because he has about 4 years left on his deal at $90 million or something around that sort of range. So for me, I think this works well for both parties. And I would be taking it if I were the Cavaliers because I don't think you're going to get much better.
Yeah, this is quite the realistic trade if we're breaking it down, right? I think it makes sense for the Cleveland Cavaliers. You're getting rid of Kevin Love's contract. You're bringing in Tyler Johnson, who's expiring. And then you have 2 young players in Frank Kaminsky, who I know our guy Dylan Jackson can't stand, and Dario Saric, who I think struggled at first when he was traded away from Philly, in Philly in general, he struggled. Didn't necessarily fit in with Minnesota. I think he's been solid for the Phoenix Suns so far this year. So that's a nice young piece. They bring in a draft pick. And as you mentioned, Jack, with, where can Kevin Love end up? That makes sense. Portland's a team we talk about. And the Phoenix Suns, if they really want to make a playoff push, I know they lost a tough one last night to the Memphis Grizzlies. No, not to the Memphis Grizzlies. Who did they lose to last night? Damn.
That's a great question. I did not watch that game. Memphis, I believe, beat Houston. It was Memphis and Houston who played last night. And
Suns lost to the Hawks, I think.
Hawks. That's it. They lost to a bad team. That's
yikes.
Yeah. But it may just scream. Because again, we get to this point in time with superstars, Devin Booker being one of them, where if things fall apart, Devin Booker requesting or wanting to get out of Phoenix isn't out of the realm of possibility. So I think if you're Phoenix, you kind of know there's a ticking time bomb. You had a really hot start to the season. You've completely cooled off the last month or so. Getting a guy like Kevin Love in will exponentially raise your chances of making a playoff spot. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. So I think it makes sense for Phoenix, who might be, coming up on a tough position with their star, Devin Booker.
And considering how the playoff race is in the West, Memphis currently is in the 8th seed at 19-22. Phoenix is only 2.5 games back. Kevin Love is still a good player. He's not as good as he once was, and obviously there's a health concern. But he could definitely boost that team up, and they have potential to make the playoffs. And even if they don't make it this year, they're a step closer for next season. If they make another trade in the offseason, all of a sudden you're looking at a playoff team. And like Kory mentioned, I think it's keeping Devin Booker happy. And then on the Cavs side, you get the first-round pick. You kind of hope Dario Saric kind of works out in Cleveland in a more pressureless role. And then Frank Kaminsky, I think, is more of kind of a salary filler. Same thing with Tyler Johnson. But overall, you get Saric, who you're taking a flyer on. I think his contract's up at the end of this year. And then also you get the first-round pick.
I also think Kaminsky could be flipped again to say like a Celtics team if you're the Cavs, similar to what the OKC will probably eventually do with Chris Paul at some stage in his tenure. Who knows? But I think Kaminsky's had a pretty nice season in Phoenix. I do agree that Tyler Johnson is just for salary filler at this point. Thank the Lord that we didn't get him, Nick, on the Brooklyn Nets team because the history could have been very, very different.
Yeah, it really could have. I mean, it'll be funny is because Tyler Johnson, after this year, his contract will expire, and then people will stop looking at him as such a bad player because I think he's a serviceable bench player, but just that contract, it's so terrible. But moving on from there, and like I said, the guys kept it spicy. Our guys, Charles Allen, jumped in. He has a trade between the Warriors and the Timberwolves. The Warriors would be getting Jeff Teague, Robert Covington, 2 first-round picks, and the Timberwolves would be getting D'Angelo Russell, Willie Cauley-Stein, Jacob Evans, Alec Burks, and Glenn Robinson III.
I like it. I like the packages. Chazza is a very smart man, and I think that the Timberwolves, reuniting D'Lo and Kat, the two boys, they're very, very good friends. We see them in Slam magazines. We see them in all these articles and on Instagram and stuff. I think Willie Cauley-Stein is a serviceable backup big, as good as Gorgie Jang has been of late. And for me, Naz Reid is probably better than all of them. Jacob Evans is fine. I don't think he's been that great in his Golden State tenure. Alec Burks is a nice sort of flame scorer off the bench, every now and then. And Glenn Robinson III has been sneakily one of the more consistent performers for Golden State as well. And Robert Covington, I think, is the piece that I think is underrated, or probably not underrated in his value, but is the most valuable piece probably on the market to so many contending teams. You're looking for a 3-and-D wing. I know Kory retweeted at some different accounts about the fact how funny it is that the Sixers now want to get Robert Covington back on their squad, as do plenty of other teams. And his deal is very, very friendly at only like $11 or $12 million a year. Jeff Teague works in terms of the money as an expiring, is a decent enough, serviceable veteran point guard, and the first rounders as well. I mean, the Warriors can use this package as well to attack in the offseason to maybe even get another superstar. If Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, we've heard, is attacking his rehab hard, he doesn't necessarily know when he'll be back. But I think that the Warriors could next year, if not maybe... I think next year they could be back into contention for an NBA chip. But this sort of deal certainly gives them a little more flexibility, some more assets to do so. But I'm a D'Lo stan, and wherever he wants to go, he didn't look like pretty happy when there was some video popping around Twitter about going to Minnesota. I think it's a little bit chilly for our boy D'Lo, even though he does have ice in his veins.
Yeah, so this is a big time trade that I don't think is out of the realm of possibilities. D'Angelo Russell, we know the relationship, as you mentioned, Jack, with him and Karl Anthony Towns, they're boys. That also fixes the possible conundrum the Minnesota Timberwolves have if they continue to lose and Karl Anthony Towns becomes unhappy. You bring in one of his best friends, it at least extends your window longer. That team also, if you're adding Glenn Robinson III and Alec Burks, on top of having D'Lo, Wiggins, and Towns, you're definitely a borderline playoff team in the West, if not a lock for a playoff seed in the West. Obviously, they're a little bit down in the Western Conference. They'd have to make a little bit of a climb because Towns has missed, I think, going on 3-4 weeks now with that knee injury. But then you look at the Warriors' perspective. Why not? You get a couple draft picks for the future. Robert Covington is the type of 3-and-D guy who I think you'd want to surround Curry, Klay, and Draymond with for the future. Obviously fits in with their offensive scheme, plays good defense. Jeff Teague, 1 year expiring. Wouldn't rule out them bringing him back on a shorter term deal. I don't think Jeff Teague is a bad backup point guard. He definitely provides some offense, can definitely run an offense. His issue now is the shooting a little bit inconsistent, and the fact of the matter, he just doesn't play much defense. But I just think it makes sense for the Warriors if they want to look towards the future, get a couple more assets. You can probably flip one of these draft picks if you need to for a more now ready player in the future. I think it's a good trade for both sides.
Yeah, I think this would be an instance where Golden State is kind of leveraging themselves against Minnesota, knowing that Karl Anthony Towns will maybe get upset if he doesn't get that piece, because I think maybe 2 first-round picks might seem like a lot, but again, you're getting D'Angelo Russell, and I think Robert Covington's value isn't at its full peak on Minnesota because they're just not a great team. If you put him on Golden State, you're getting peak Robert Covington because he just fits so well next to a guy like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, because he doesn't need the ball. He's going to make plays off ball defensively and offensively. And like you guys mentioned, getting those 2 first-round picks for the Warriors, that's more trade assets, and they're going to get a lottery pick this year. So it's like they could really make a power move. This would set Golden State up, like Jack mentioned, to possibly be a contender next season.
Yeah. And not to mention, not that, you're maybe giving up, maybe someone would see the 2 draft picks as too much for D'Lo. But the one thing you're getting with D'Lo in return is security. He's coming off a freshly signed contract. You have him for 3 more years. So getting a piece like D'Lo is really secure. I mean, obviously we know in today's NBA, all it takes is a player going to the front office realistically and saying, I want to get out. And teams seem to facilitate that. But having, Towns, Wiggins, and D'Lo all locked up for the future, at least you have 3, arguably top 100, top 50, arguably top 25 guys on your team.
Yeah, especially because they lack such a playmaking point guard. Like they just haven't had somebody, even when Jeff T got there, he never really lived up to the hype when they signed him to that deal. So I think D'Angelo Russell will provide that. And then who knows, like him and Towns could have some amazing chemistry and they would just be lethal from deep, then be kind of filling out the rest of the roster. It's just a question you ask yourself. Do you think you could be a championship team with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns being your 2 best players?
No.
And that's where it's like, you're committed to these 2, and then you already have Wiggins' contract committed too. So now all of a sudden, this team is locked in.
I don't want to say no yet on that because I think Towns could be the number 1 player on a championship team. I think D'Lo could be a number 2. I don't know when that timeline would happen, but I don't think for me it's a straight no on those 2 guys being championship guys.
I think it is because, and maybe this is just me being naive, but you need a really, really good wing, a Robert Covington type at least to back up and provide a sense of stability, defensive energy, good role player sort of sturdiness within that organization. If you are relying on a superstar point guard or a superstar center, it is very rare for teams to challenge for championships, win championships when your best player isn't a wing. I mean, the Golden State Warriors have done it with Stephen Curry before, but then they also did it a lot easier with Kevin Durant on the roster. I think Karl Anthony Towns isn't in champion. Like we might see a test over the next few years because right now Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid are probably closer, much, much closer to championship contention. And if those guys can't necessarily reach the pinnacle, then I don't think Karl Anthony Towns has a shot in hell because I think Denver is in a much better position, despite the fact I've let my thoughts known about Jamal Murray and the Sixers as well. We've seen them at their peak, even though the Ben Simmons and everything else doesn't necessarily work, chemistry, on-court, off-court, all that sort of stuff. But if we can't see it happen with either of those organizations, then Minnesota has no shot in hell, to be honest.
I think I'm less concerned about that. I think I'm more concerned about defensively. 2 of your best players, not being good on the defensive end. Cat had a good start to the season, but then he kind of lacked off. And no disrespect to D'Angelo Russell, he'll probably never be a positive defender just because of the skill set he has.
Fair.
So, I mean, I wouldn't completely rule it out. You'd have to fill the rest of the roster out with like ideal pieces, but then you're stuck with Andrew Wiggins' contract, who I don't think is amazing. Obviously, he played better when Cat was there, but since Cat's been out, he's been pretty bad.
Yeah.
So moving on from there, and like I mentioned, we will be dropping trades. We'll be talking about them pretty much every single episode, but on to the top 5 most exciting players to watch this season. Now, this is all personal preference. Who wants to start off, Jack or Kory?
Well, we've all got, surely everyone has Joe Harris on their list, I'm assuming?
No.
Yes? Yes? No? Okay. Outside of my boy Joey Buckets, onlyfans.com/Jac Manuell/Joe Harris, I've got
Now I got to give this episode the explicit rating.
in no particular order, Kyrie Irving, LeBron James, Luka Doncic. I'm not sure. Is it Doncic or Doncic?
I think you're
not what Snoop said. Whatever Snoop said was not right.
Don Kalicic. I mean, I'm not asking you, Kory. I can't remember the last time you said a European name correctly on this show.
And Doncic. Come on.
If you haven't noticed, whenever I'm unsure of somebody's last name, I will consistently call them by their first name, Luka, Giannis, or just names that don't roll off the tongue because it just seems so much easier.
Wait, Nick, you can't say Antetokounmpo?
I can, but it's not like it's not an easy one. Antetokounmpo is easy to say in a sense, but it's not like when I'm trying to spit out 10 words in the matter of 5 seconds.
I say it only because I want people to know that I can say it.
Of course you do. That guy is next on my list, by the way, and my fifth guy is the guy that we've been talking about at the start of the show, Jac Manuell.
So my five were John Morant, Brandon Ingram, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Domantas Sabonis. I've enjoyed Domantas Sabonis. Obviously, being a Pacers guy, I had to throw one Pacer in the mix. Sabonis is just a walking double-double, which may come into play when we do our Believe It or Not.
You worried about, before Nick does his, mate, you worried about his knee injury and the fact that, like, it can't get any worse, but he's going to play through it. Like, is that troublesome? Like, do you know anything more about it? I've only seen little bits and pieces on Twitter.
I know Pacers Twitter is extremely concerned.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those, of course, the Domantas Sabonis knee injury comes into play right near the time we're getting back Victor Oladipo, who missed time with a knee injury, and also, a quad/knee injury. But before Victor Oladipo got hurt last year, which is to be noted, he was feeling a lot of discomfort in his knee for the few weeks before the actual injury occurred. He had some rest time. They were careful with him to a degree, and then that's when the injury happened. And I know a lot of Pacers Twitter in general is kind of connecting the dots between that and Domantas Sabonis. Granted, it may not be the same issue, and we surely hope it's not. But Sabonis is playing with discomfort, some knee soreness, and continues to play. And you have to wonder, when does knee soreness become more than just knee soreness, right? I know for myself, I've been working out with back soreness, and it's getting to the point where the back soreness doesn't really feel like soreness anymore. So it's just one of those things where, like, eventually something's going to go wrong or something's going to get worse. Knee soreness just doesn't stay soreness. At least I don't think it does. So I think there is something to be concerned about. I know he's questionable for tonight. I personally would rest him a couple weeks. I don't know why we're going to bury this guy into the ground. I would just be very cautious.
Yeah, I think it does make sense, and I don't necessarily think it'll lead to the same injury that Victor Oladipo had, but it could lead to another knee injury, another ankle injury, or just an overcompensation because he's going to relying more on the healthy knee.
Yeah. I mean, again, and also, it's something like Nate McMillan should, watch better. For example, he had knee soreness going into that Miami Heat game last week. The Miami Heat were up by 25 in the fourth quarter, and he was still playing Domantas Sabonis, which is just one of those, moments where everyone collectively who watches the Pacers go, Nick McMillan, what are you thinking, dog? This guy has a sore knee. Yeah, he's got 25 and 17, but why are you running him into the ground? I would just be a lot more cautious.
It's like Dwayne Casey giving Blake Griffin
minutes on this. It's like, I know your leg's about to fall off, but can you just wrap it up and get out there for me?
Yeah, it's like we're up 20 or we're down 20, but we still need you out there. But to do my list real quick, obviously Kyrie Irving, happy to see him back on the court. He's been exciting and a ton of highlight plays. Jack mentioned John Morant. He's just been electric. I don't know if I can recall a rookie coming in and just having this many highlight plays, and he's not scared of anybody. I remember last night where he, I think he hit a three and he said, over James Harden, he's like, tell that motherfucker to respect my shot or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that was so hard.
I was like, okay. And I mean, and that poster he had on Aaron Baines, I'm not going to forget that ever. That was just a monster poster to put over a big man. So John Morant definitely has my ticket. Giannis, obviously, he's extremely exciting. What was it, Kory, last night? He scored
37 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks, 4 assists in 21 minutes.
It's, man.
You can't even do that in 2K.
No. And not only was it it was, I think he was 12 for 17 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3, and then 10 of 12 from the line. So it's he did it from every aspect too. It wasn't like he was just dunking. He was also knocking down threes during this stretch as well, which is what makes him so deadly.
Yeah, I mean, Giannis is going to be fun to watch for years to come. Obviously, King James, you're never going to ignore him. One of still the best players in the NBA, if not the best. And then my personal preference, got to throw in Karis LeVert.
Neither of you had Luka. No Luka love. Are you guys just a Snoop Dogg fans or something?
No, you know what? Luka has kind of annoyed me lately with the flopping, and that's why he didn't make my list, because I think he's getting a little bit too into it. Obviously, James Harden didn't make my list either, and I think, honestly, Luka is starting to get into that flopping a little bit too much and then complaining about when he's not getting all the calls, and I think, hey, you're a second-year player. You're not going to get all these calls. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I had Luka on the cusp. But if I had to throw in a Pacer, someone had to get the knockout, and it was Luka.
Fair enough.
And I mean, Trae Young was on the cusp for me too, because he's really exciting. Just being able to pull up from anywhere on the court.
I think I've enjoyed watching Trae Young more than Luka Doncic this year. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I think I have.
Yeah, it's pretty spicy.
Yeah, it's not like the fire sauce. It's more of like just a hot sauce.
Yeah, like I was choosing between mild and whatever somewhat sweeter than mild is. I'm not sure. Not a big wing guy.
I would. I'll give Lou Will a shout out too because he just makes some shots that are just weird, like that no one even makes, even when you're playing horse.
Yeah, I mean, but I think right now, and it's awesome to see that Zion's coming back, Victor Oladipo's coming back, Kyrie's been back and playing awesome. I think that there's been plenty of talk about NBA marketability and how to market the game right now. I said this on the outlet, and probably last time I said it on plenty of other podcasts. When you have superstars right now, when you have talent, just put highlights aplenty out about whoever is doing it. It doesn't need to be Alex Caruso, the GOAT, according to LeBron James, apparently. Just do it of every single player. Like, it doesn't matter what market they're in. Jac Manuell and the Memphis Grizzlies are getting a heap of hype, yet they're in one of the small markets. Victor Oladipo in Indiana and Domantas Sabonis doing things. It just market the talent. We know that this is a star-driven league. We want to see the highlights from them. We want to talk about them. And that is what matters. It doesn't need to be Lakers. And, maybe, I think there's obviously probably more Knicks coverage than there probably has been Bucks coverage this year as well. I don't necessarily feel horribly strongly about this. I just think that the reason why I love this league, I love talking about it, is just seeing the talents of the players. And I've said a million times on probably nearly every outlet I've been on and every JBT. And, a lot of the times the buzz because of injury issues with the Nets as well. Health is when superstar players are healthy. Like, imagine how popular the league and the ratings and how much like salivation we would have if Steph Curry was healthy, if Klay Thompson was healthy, and if Kevin Durant was healthy. Our top 50 would probably be impossible to do, but the league
this freaking top 5 would be hard to do.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculously fun. I mean, the game is in a good state, and I think we need to recognize that. And I think maybe some pundits need to take a little bit of a look at what's happening on the OTG Podcast Network and at OTGBasketball.com to see how to present the NBA in a way that is fair and balanced while also still picking cool storylines to go for and cool athletes and cool personalities because, I think that there is some bias in there and it makes sense because that's where the dollars lie.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I do miss watching Steph Curry play, miss watching Kevin Durant, and then Klay Thompson just having those ridiculous quarters. But like you said, there's still plenty of other talent that keeps you interested on a daily basis.
Definitely. Full of talent, this league right now.
100%. And I mean, there's just been, even like you mentioned earlier, Kory, with the Pelicans, as bad as their record is, they're in a ton of games and they're in a lot of close games. They still have highlight plays. They're still fun to watch, and that's important. And the same thing even with the Hawks. They're not as much in close games, but they're still fun to watch with Trae Young. But with that said, I'm going to pass it over to you for Believe It or Not.
All right. Believe it or not, your favorite Wednesday topic. Wait, Wednesday, what would this be? This would be topic, right? Segment of the week. Yeah, there we go. That's why it's your favorite. I don't even know what it's called. So here we go. This is a fun little stat about the young guys in the league. This is from Monday. So again, some of these stats could fluctuate slightly. By BIPM leaders in plays of their age of 21 or younger, Luka Doncic is number 1, Jason Tatum is number 2, Jared Allen is number 3, Wendell Carter is number 4, Jackson Hayes is number 5. Basically, what PIPM is just pretty much your points of impact. Thoughts, believe it or not.
I'm intrigued to hear that Jackson Hayes is on that list. I think that in terms of the talent that he has and the raw potential and upside, it's it's pretty huge when it comes to for a big guy. But I've also seen him as a net negative for the Pelicans, whatever on the court. Like, it seems to me that he gets outscored, he gets outworked by anyone. Guys like Sabonis body him. Anyone who has a little bit of strength. And I mean, I could say for the same thing, probably for last year's version, the year before version of Jared Allen, he's certainly beefed up a little bit. He still gets a little bit monstered every now and then, but nice to see my boy Jared Allen there. And for people who don't give him enough credit, he is still very, very young. And he is one of the best young centers coming up in the league. And I think Luka Doncic up the top, those top names that you said, Kory, no surprises there.
I want to jump in, before I cut you off, Nick, sorry. This is also why I wanted this in there, because I want to tell you guys this as well. When it comes to league-wide PIPM, Jared Allen's 23rd.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, he is loved by analytics. Like, his advanced numbers have been almost really good since he's been a rookie, so it's not really a surprise. And I think his impact defensively is kind of slept on. Obviously, he gets the highlights for the big blocks, but he's a real presence in there. And I think we had on a couple weeks ago, one of the stats was his rim protection, his field goal, the opponent's field goal percentage at the rim. So no surprise other than Jackson Hayes, like Jack mentioned. I think at times I've seen Pelicans fans kind of complain about him, but also I could see the positive factor being they don't have that skill set on the roster. They don't really have a rim protector other than him because Derek Favors has been banged up. And he also gives them an opportunity for putbacks and oops. And that's just something they've really lacked a lot of time other than when he's on the floor.
Yeah. Next up, only 3 players so far this NBA season have 30-plus double-doubles. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Andre Drummond, and Domantas Sabonis, believe it or not.
Oh, it's very easy to believe, Nick. I think in that.
You mean
sort
Kory?
Of
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I get the. I'm a little bit racist to the American accent. You all sound the same to me.
Okay.
I mean, what made sense for me when you said that, Kory, I'm expecting these to be big guys who just get a lot of rebounds. It's a lot harder to get a double-double or a triple-double because of the assists. It's a lot harder to get them. And so I'm not surprised at all. I believe it. I think the game from SGA the other night where he had 20 boards, it was insane. It's like the only guy since Shaq as a 21-year-old to have a 20 rebound triple-double performance. Absolutely insane. So I'm not surprised at all, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised either.
Okay, next up on our list, this came as of this is a pain. This I'm sorry to bring this up because I know you guys played the Utah Jazz last night. Since December 1st, there are 111 players who have attempted at least 75 threes. 110 of those players are shooting below 46%. The only one shooting above 46%, Joe Ingles at 52.8%. Believe it or not.
I mean, he has been flames of late. We let him have a career night last night. I normally only have room in my heart for love for one Joe, but I'm a big fan of Joe Ingles. And I know I'm not speaking about Joe from You. I mean, I'm a big fan of that Netflix's You. Get on that, boys. I'm sure you're probably
already watched it. Yeah.
Get around it. But Joe Ingles, for me, just speaking more broadly rather than just the statistics, started the season off a little bit poorly, but as a human being, Joe Ingles is freaking amazing. He has led an initiative, with some of the other Aussie players in terms of their bushfire relief efforts. What he does for the autism community and around kids and that. Obviously, he has a son who has that as well. He is just one of the true good blokes of the NBA. And I mean, we see a lot of amazing work in the community, in NBA Cares, and with so many of these different athletes. But I'm just a big fan of Aussie Joe and everything that he does when he is successful. I mean, we know Toby Flenderson was one of the more hated characters on The Office, but for me, he's one of the more beloved characters in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm surprised you said all those nice things after he shoved Joe Harris last night. But
I mean, he's still Australian. He's still a nice bloke. It's short-term memory. I put it behind me, mate.
I'm not really surprised because I feel like he's been streaky in the past where he's had like these stretches where he hasn't been good from 3, and then all of a sudden he'll have these stretches where he's lights out. I mean, I just think about that playoff series against OKC where he was hitting him over in Paul George's face. He just kind of just has these stretches where he's dominant, so no surprise here. I don't think he'll keep it up the rest of the season, but for this point, no big deal.
Next up, the Memphis Grizzlies are 12-0 when Dylan Brooks scores 20 or more points. Believe it or not.
That's an interesting stat.
And Dylan Brooks has been flames, man. That kid he's doing, and I think that he's part of this young nucleus in Memphis that is just building organically in a way that none of us necessarily saw happening. And I mean, obviously this is going to taper off to at least some extent. I don't think the Grizzlies are going to maintain the success. I think that they're likely to drop out of the playoffs. But if you're talking about the talent, the upside of talent, I would take right now Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson over LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield. Like, as we talk about superstar duos, and the league is driven by talent. Teams and their success are driven by their top end. The top end of those guys. Jaren Jackson's been averaging like 20 points as well. Ja Morant is, literally a Sports Center top 10 highlights package nightly by himself. I don't believe it fully, Kory, but I like it.
Yeah, I agree with Jack. I mean, I don't think Dylan Brooks's production is what kind of makes them win or lose. It's obviously more John Morant and Jaren Jackson. But I think having two very good players, and obviously John Morant, I think is a lock to be an all-star in the future, and Jaren Jackson could definitely get there, allows a guy like Dylan Brooks to really pop off because I think he's a perfect kind of complementary piece, and he actually kind of brings some of that grit and grind from the past Grizzlies teams.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys. I mean, he's been fun to watch, and he fell out of the rotation a little bit last year, if I recall.
Yeah,
he
he had a Yeah, exactly. He's dealt with injuries, and last season was really weird because his rookie season he was very good, and then last year was like, oh, what's going to happen with Dylan Brooks? And then this year he's back on track.
Yeah. So last one, RJ Barrett over his last 6 games is averaging 19 points per game on 13 shots per game, 5 rebounds per game, 1.3 assists per game, 1.2 steals per game. Shooting splits of 46, 42, and 78. The free throw number is pretty big since he was shooting like 54% late last year going into the new year. So believe it or not.
Yeah, I think I believe it, Kory, because in terms of what we think RJ Barrett could be, I know you think that he could be better than freaking Zion Williamson for some reason. No idea about that, my guy.
Better career.
All right. All right, well then, Trae Young's still got about 3 more years in the league to make that prediction from 2 years ago pod null and void, but we'll leave that there. I remember. Okay, well I'll jump on Full Access Hoops, then we can argue for about 3 hours straight, and we can release it as a series of podcasts like the Book of Basketball with Bill Simmons. But in relation to RJ, I remember seeing him in November against the Sacramento Kings at a game while I was in America. I did go and see the enemy, Nick. I did tell you that. I'm sorry if I'm bringing on a public platform and hope I can get the buzz.
They lost, though, so right? It didn't really matter.
They did. They lost absolutely horribly. They were cheering for Carmelo, and the loudest cheer of the night was for Iggy Brazdeikis. So that's where the Knicks were at that stage under David Fizdale. But what I saw, and probably what Kory sees in RJ Barrett, is a mentality that I think is going to breed success. I think he has a mentality where he doesn't care what the numbers are. He's going to keep playing his game, keep remaining aggressive, keep remaining engaged, which is why I think he's going to be a very capable starter. I'm not as high on his upside. I think his upside might be as high as a DeMar DeRozan in his peak, which is still a top 20, top 30 player on a really, really good day. I'm not as, but one thing I do like there, Kory, like you mentioned, is the effectiveness. Rookie seasons, you go through peaks, you go through troughs. Not everyone's going to be Ja Morant. And, RJ Barrett has gone onto the radar quite a bit, because of guys like Kendrick Nunn and these other sort of kids doing some things that are very unexpected. So for me, RJ Barrett is still probably the second best rookie maybe out of this class so far. Jarrett Culver's also been quite good of late. I'm sure you could give his numbers as well that have been similar in a bit of a rise in the absence of Karl Anthony Towns. But I'm high on RJ Barrett, and I don't think that those numbers are consistent, but I don't think his low numbers are consistent either. I think there's an equal balance of an equilibrium somewhere in the middle.
It's kind of like when we talked about Lauri Markkanen, and he had the month of shooting like 40+% from 3 and then 20%. It's like somewhere in between. I think RJ Barrett can put up this type of production. I don't think the efficiency is going to be there. I don't think he's a 40% three-point shooter. He's probably more of in the 30s, probably more of the low 30s. But he's shown the flashes where he could potentially be the next best player moving forward.
Definitely. And
but question,
believe it or not.
Okay, question for you, Kory. Who's going to have a better career between these three? Zion, John Morant, and RJ Barrett?
Ja Morant.
Are you only taking, I'm assuming, and I get where your probably reasoning has come from. Is it because of just you don't believe in Zion's health?
Well, it's partly. I mean, health is a big concern for me, but also I'm still not sold on his game transitioning beautifully to the NBA. I still think he's a weird fit. I mean, I think he's going to be a very solid player, but I don't think Zion can ever be the guy who, in crunch time, you're like, we got to get the ball to Zion. I don't know if I'm sure Zion can be the best player on a championship-winning team because I'm not sure how he can impact the game. But again, we haven't seen him on the NBA court yet, so my thoughts could change dramatically when we see him in a week time. But I'm not so sold on him being the best player on a championship team, and then you throw on the injuries. I'm just more sold on the fact that I know Ja Morant for sure can be the best player on a championship team, and I think RJ Barrett could get up there because of his ability to create his own shot and score in heaps and bunches when he does get it going. I'm just lower on Zion, and I'll probably end up biting that take too.
I think
I hope to be wrong. Like, I never want someone to suck, right? Like, it's one of those things where, like, I kind of hope somebody proves me wrong. But yeah,
it's like Trae Young did.
Yeah, I mean, Trae Young blew me out of the water, so there we go.
I think when Zion's fully like developed, I think his like go-to area to where he can get you clutch buckets will be that mid to low post, because physically, I just think even right now he's so strong that there's not really many people that can defend him on a drive going to the rim. He just is going to move humans. We saw him move Rudy Gobert in the preseason. I think that's the biggest factor, where it's like his skill set isn't perfect for the NBA, but he's also like a human specimen, kind of like LeBron. He just is something that you don't see from a human on a regular basis or yearly.
And
that's true.
And I also think that, in terms of the skill set and such, I see, if we're doing LeBron comparisons, LeBron never really had a jumper until he worked like incredibly hard on it back in my 2010, I think it was around that range.
Yeah, Miami time is when he had some crazy 3 years from there.
Yeah, and also, I think, we're seeing a sort of similar rise with Giannis. These guys that are just obsessive athletes and just, live and breathe and eat basketball. I think Zion is in a similar range of that for me. And that's why I think that he can be. And I have health concerns a little bit about Ja Morant as well, and similar sort of Russell Westbrook sort of Derrick Rose range. But I think he could have at some stage in career he's going to have an injury. He's already sort of being rested a little bit here and there by the Grizzlies to sort of forego that in the future. I predict that. I don't want it to happen, but the way that he plays is incredibly reckless in an entertaining way. But also the stress that he puts on his body. You could make a comparison point directly to Zion Williamson. Obviously, Ja Morant is a lot slimmer, but there probably is a lack of strength in some of his joints and in some of his lower body parts. So I think that Ja Morant could easily. It's weird to say, but out of those three guys, the safest bet in terms of just being a 10, 15-year NBA vet is probably RJ Barrett. But in terms of upside, it's Ja and Zion with no question.
Yeah, I think the real scary thing about Ja Morant is he doesn't really know how to land.
Yeah, that's been an issue I've seen.
I've seen his legs bend weird ways, and it's just like he's young, so he doesn't get injured, or maybe he just has that LeBron gene where you can twist your ankle and nothing happens. But like, there's been some weird scenarios where he's gone to the rim and he just thinks about going to the rim and not about his landing. And that's something that's pretty typical of a young player. Hopefully Memphis can get out in front of that. Like Jack mentioned, you don't want to see him suffer injuries like we've seen from Westbrook, John Wall, Derrick Rose, all these explosive guys, because not only is it, explosive in terms of hurting your knee with the jump, it's the landing too. And even a guy like Dwayne Wade, when he was more so the Flash, he'd constantly get hurt because he was always ending up in like the first row.
Yeah, and he learned how to, and I think that that's a process in terms of learning how to land. Like in any sport, how you fall and take contact and adjust to physicality in some extent is, a key point of how long your career could be. And, I'm hoping that all three of these guys, are superstars and driving this league for many, many years to come, because Zion, we said at the top of the episode, I don't think I've been more excited to see a player on the court that isn't going to be playing for the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, especially with all the hype and, just what we saw in preseason. There's just a ton of excitement. But, guys, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Kory, when am I jumping on Full Access, my dude? You haven't slid into those DMs. You've been sliding too many into your gym girls. Is that what it is? No time for your boy?
Very soon. Very soon. Very soon.
He hit you with a public call out. He said on radio, like this is first take or something.
On the podcast, I'm gonna have people coming for
me. But as always, a pleasure, fellas. Big thanks to everybody for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube.
Happy birthday, Sin.